Okay. Oh. There we go, baby.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Hey, welcome back to Clint Street Machines. That was definitely a stormy day, and I love working in the shop on days like that because I just throw the big door open and there's the weather just 10 feet away from me, and I get to enjoy it while I'm working. So I really enjoyed it. I'm going to go ahead and release that whole clip as a separate video. It's about 5 minutes long, so if you guys see that come up in your feed, check it out if you want to watch the storm for about 5 minutes. Otherwise, you can just skip it. But anyway, let's get back to the Subaru Brat. So last time we left off, we had gotten the body down onto the frame and it was sitting in there, but it was a few inches forward where it needed to be. We had a cross member that's getting in the way. So what we've done now is we've cut a bunch more material out of the bottom of the vehicle in order to get the body lined up on the chassis correctly from front to back and side to side. Now it's not lined up and down. We're going to do that in the next video, but it is lined up front to back. It establishes the wheelbase and it allows us to look at our wheelbase and go ahead and make some plans. So let's do that right now. All right, so as you can see, we now have the wheel centered in the back of the wheel wells. So that's good to go, and that's going to locate our front. Now, the Subaru Brat has a 100-inch wheelbase, and the wheelbase, for those who don't know, is the distance between the center of that wheel to the center of that wheel. Now, the S10 that we took this frame out of has a 108-inch wheelbase, which means this front wheel, when we position the back wheel in the same spot as the original wheel of the Subaru, this front wheel is now 8 inches farther forward than the factory Subaru suspension would have been. So what that meant for our engine placement is instead of 17.5 inches, we would have 9.5 inches if we were to put this front wheel back where the Subaru had it. And that's not going to be anywhere near enough. So we're not going to shorten the front end of this Subaru, which means we have to modify a couple things. All right, so for starters, right here, this curve, this is the wheel housing. It was originally in the vehicle, and this curve is there so that when you turn the tires, the tire has somewhere to tuck into. All right, so if we come over here to my S10, we still have it intact here. So that curve I just showed you is this that's left on the Subaru, and we cut all that out. And if you come inside the car and look, or the truck, there's this big old lump in the engine compartment, or in the passenger compartment on both sides, that kind of takes up some foot space. All right, so by moving these front wheels forward 8 inches, that means this clearance that is in here to clear the wheel when you turn can also come forward 8 inches, which means that big hump that was sitting in our interior before will no longer be there. Like, we can bring the firewall out to here, 8 inches from there, which is, basically right about here. So we could bring the floor out all the way to here, basically, and have all this room for our feet that we didn't have before, and still clear the tire when we turn. From the factory, like I said, it had that big old goofy thing in it and a little tiny transmission tunnel. Well, we're going to need a much bigger transmission tunnel, but we don't need the footwell over here. So what we're doing is, instead of our feet being off to the right beside this hump, it's going to be off to the left beside the transmission tunnel. So this space will open up. Our pedals are going to have to fit in here. So the firewall kind of needs to stay pretty close to where it is in order to not lose any space inside the vehicle. But I think if we lose an inch or two, we might still be okay. So we'll see how that goes. Now, let me get the fender on here and I'll show you what we're dealing with as far as the wheelbase. So here's the problem with moving the wheels forward. They don't line up with the wheel wells anymore. So we got a couple options. One, we can either slide this fender forward until it lines up again, and then we have to build an extension on the back of this fender to meet the door, so we don't have a big 8-inch gap. Well, that's kind of hard to do. We've got a lot of body lines. This body line here is curved and it goes front to back on the vehicle. So the problem is, if I was to match this curve and build an extension to make this fender longer, the front of this nose is going to drop down as I come forward to keep that body line lined up. And what happens when I do that is, now I got to do a bunch of sectioning, because this body line that's under here won't line up, and this body line down here won't line up anymore, because like I said, the fender is going to move down. So I would have to section all this out, move those body lines to get them looking right again. it'd be a big pain in the ass. And then we'd end up with a really long nose on the Subaru, which would look really funky. The plan I have is I'm going to cut a square patch like that. And I'm going to cut that out. And the reason I'm doing it square like that is so I can just slide it forward, keeping this lined up, this top edge, slide this whole wheel well forward, cut out another square like this, slide this up, weld it back in, and then all I got to do is make a square patch to fill in this area back here. So that's the plan. That's what we're going to do. That keeps the nose the same length as it was from the factory, but relocates the wheel wells so it looks intentional. The other option, like I talked about, was we could pull this forward until it lines up. But like I said, that's going to give us a really long nose, which is okay from a, drag race standpoint. But this isn't really a drag car, it's a street car. So I think it's going to be better to do it the way I initially showed you. Okay, so now we've got that ironed out. Let's take a quick look at this engine. I'm not going to get too into it because we'll do a separate video on it. But basically, we have our engine back from the machine shop. This was the 400 that we got to put into this project. And I'm going to go ahead and just use it in the Subaru for now. It's a good way to test bed the thing, right? I can just throw it in this thing like it's a test mule. I can tune it, I can tweak it, I can figure out how to make it run right. I can do all that stuff while it's in this car, and then it'll be good to go. And we've also come up with our transmission solution, which is we found an old school 4-speed. This is out of a later model Chrysler product. This is probably about the same year as that engine, which is around a 77. So this has the aluminum case, but the reason why that's a big plus is because it's also an overdrive unit. That's our solution for an engine and trans. So at least we have that. All right, guys, just thought I'd give you a quick look at my initial mock-up. I'm kind of thinking something along these lines. Very, very, very raked. So this has about a 9 degrees rake on it. To give you an idea, let's come over here. There you go. Looking at my toolbox and everything else, that should give you an idea of how much angle it's got on it. Or rake, as us old timers call it. So it doesn't look bad from there, but when you start coming down here, now we're talking. Yeah, I know it's ridiculous. That's kind of the point. All right, and that's what we're doing. Kinda. The engine's not exactly where it needs to be, but it's close enough we can at least show you guys what I'm thinking. This is a pretty upright seated position. Okay, so now you guys have an idea of what we're going for on this thing. Basically, a cartoon, a caricature of a 70s street freak with a rusty body on it. And a vehicle you would have never seen back in the 70s, because no one would have done this to a Subaru Brat back in the day. And I don't think anyone would do it now in their right minds. There you go. In the next video, we'll actually be mounting the body. We're already in the process of doing that, and I'm still filming that video. Once the body is mounted, I can do my frame modification and final mount the body and determine the angle and everything else. And then once that's done, then I can figure out where my firewall goes. That lets me know where I can put my engine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing this in steps that need to be done in order to facilitate this as quickly as possible. Now, we're not going to make the no-name nationals with a running driving vehicle. That was pretty much a pretty lofty goal when I set it. I don't know why I do that. I always think things are going to take a third of the time they actually take. But at any rate, it will be there. We're just trying to get it to a point where it's rolling on its own wheels. The frame is mounted to the body. The engine is mounted to the frame, and everything in it is bolted down and ready to go. And it looks like a real car sitting there. So that's the goal. Get it to the point where it looks like a real car. And then I can start working on filling in the blanks after the No Name Nationals is over. So thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and do all that good stuff for the algorithm. And until we see you guys next time, thanks so much for watching.